So welcome. Welcome to this afternoon's presentation of the proposed HR design plan. My name is Harry Webney-Behrman. I've been privileged to work with this project as the lead of what we call the collaboration team, whose function has been and continues to be to work with the project leadership to make sure that all of us as a campus community have timely and meaningful opportunities to provide input, provide feedback, and otherwise to understand the ramifications of the design of the new HR system on campus. In a moment, I'll be introducing Bob Lavinia, the Director of the Office of Human Resources, who has been the lead on this project, and who will be taking you through an overview of the proposed plan. In addition to all of us who are here at Union South this afternoon, we are also providing a video feed which will then be captured on the HR Design website. After Bob's presentation, we will be accepting questions and comments from you. The questions will be sought in two different forms. First of all, we've handed out index cards so that people can put questions on cards. A couple of colleagues of mine on the collaboration team will be collecting those at the conclusion of Bob's presentation and then making sure I'm receiving those in a way that helps me understand the key questions that are coming up in the room. In addition, we'll have a microphone, so we'll be able to allow people to address questions from the floor. We have no illusions about being able to answer every question that might be on your minds this afternoon. And so collecting all of these questions is really helpful. We'll be responding to them, as many as possible, on the HR Design website and trying to organize those in a way so that it's easy for the full campus community to understand the types of questions that are arising, the answers to the degree they are specifically understood at this time, or the degree to which answers will emerge over time, and also for us as we're moving forward with specific design and implementation to be able to realize that these are concerns that continue to exist or questions that continue to be asked so that we're sure to respond to them. Invite you to also go to the HR Design website for the full report of the plan, at which you can really be able to dive into the details in a greater degree than we can possibly this afternoon. The last comment I want to make as we begin this afternoon's presentation is that the intention from the start of this project has been for us as a community to be able to understand the implications of this opportunity and for us to be able to work as collaboratively as possible to be able to design the best HR system we possibly can going forward. Given that intention, we ask that you bring that intention into this conversation as well, and that we ask you to share the time with others in the community in terms of comments or questions, and be sure to ask questions that are pertinent to the conversation at hand. There are a lot of different things that concern us. We appreciate that. That's important. But some of the things are outside the scope of where we are in this process at this point in time. So from time to time, I might bring that forward in my own comments, but I hope that if we all work on getting the most important questions on the floor this afternoon, we can respond to them. With that, I turn this over to Bob Lavinia for an explanation of the proposal.
Thanks, Harry. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Much better. How's the volume? Can you hear me in the back? I was once at an event where the guy said, if you can't hear me, raise your hand. So I never really figured out how that worked. Like Harry, I want to thank you for being here today. I know we have some folks who are watching via their personal computers. We really appreciate the willingness of everyone across the campus to participate in this sort of second round of engagement opportunities. We had an event like this last week, which was very well attended. We'll have an event tonight at 11 p.m. We'll see how well that is attended, but that's an opportunity for our second and third shift colleagues to hear about the plan and also provide feedback and their views and insights. As I think most of you know, a week ago Friday, we posted the plan on the hrdesign.wisc.edu website. The plan is a summary of the recommendations that the 11 work teams made. The 11 work teams made a total of 158 recommendations. 200 of your colleagues who participated either on the work teams or on the advisory committee worked very hard for several months, made a series of recommendations. engaged in a series of engagement opportunities, got some feedback, revised their recommendations, and then we took those recommendations and identified what we believed were the high priority items. We have described the plan as an HR strategic plan because even though there are certain aspects of it that have to be in place by July 1st, 2013, the scope of this HR system will extend beyond July 1st, 2013, and we see it as an opportunity to phase in over a 2 or 3 year period a wide range of changes that will put our university in the best possible position to attract, develop, engage, and retain talent. So today, we want to give you a fairly high-level overview of the plan, give you an opportunity to see some of the priority items that are included in the plan, opportunity to engage with you today, and then we'll show you how we would like to collect feedback as we move forward towards final decisions by the executive sponsors, the chancellor, the provost, and the vice chancellor for administration on what the final plan will look like. So, do a little bit of background. I know many of you participated in the events that we had during the spring, and you've seen this, but I think it's important to go back and revisit the vision that we initially created for this project. A pretty typical vision statement, campus-wide effort to build through thoughtful design a new HR system that would serve the needs of the entire campus community. But we dug a little deeper in that vision statement. What do we mean by thoughtful design? A process that is efficient, that adds value, that each step, each rule, each process in the HR system adds value. And while I think there is legitimate area for disagreement over what this new system should look like, I think we can all agree that not every step, not every process, not every rule that exists right now adds value. Flexibility and responsiveness to build a system that will enable us to respond as a world-class institution of higher education, not only to the talent issues that we face today, but those that we'll face in the future that we haven't even anticipated yet. Alignment. We have multiple personnel systems on this campus. We have one system for classified employees. We have a separate system for unclassified employees. And if we consider benefits only, we have a third system for our trades employees. And the individual aspects of those three systems are not always in alignment. We want to be consistent, as common to as many employees as possible, and we want to be transparent. One of the things that the work teams learned as they began their work, as they began to collect data from across the campus, is there is a lot of confusion about how our current personnel and HR system operates. We want to create a more transparent system. We want to create a workforce and community of the 21st century that is diverse, that not only reflects the diversity of Wisconsin, of Madison and Dane County, but also the larger workforce, and reflects the fact that we are a university that operates in a global economy and needs to reflect that diversity as well. We want to do everything we can to have a highly engaged workforce. Our employees are committed to their jobs, to the mission of the organization, and to each other. We want to get the right talent into our workforce. Not only the best talent, but people who are committed to the mission of this university. And we want, at the same time we create an HR system that is adaptable, we want our workforce to be adaptable as well. As I said, to meet not only the challenges that we understand and we see today, but the challenges that we will face in the future. And of course, it all moves towards achieving the vision of UW-Madison to be a model public university and to achieve the Wisconsin idea to be a resource for the state, the nation, and the world. We asked the work teams, as they did their work, as they collected data, as they analyzed the current system, as they identified where we needed to be, and they made recommendations to get us from where we are to where they believe we need to be, to check their recommendations against the vision for the project. And if you go to the website, you'll see the final reports of each of the 11 work teams, and you will also see a mapping between what the work teams recommended and how they believe it fits into the project vision. So this picture shows sort of the arc of the project, where we were at the beginning and where we are now and where we're going. You see on the left side, we had a series of inputs, the campus strategic framework, strategic mission and vision of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which includes attracting a high quality and developing a high quality workforce and rewarding people for merit, and also continuing to move towards achieving a diverse workforce. We had the Badger Working Group parameters. This is a group of stakeholders, including representatives of governance groups, that Darryl Bazell put together about a year and a half ago, that began the conversation about what this new HR system should look like, and developed a set of principles which the HR design project adopted. Project vision, which I just showed you, and a set of project parameters which are included in the plan that laid out, in addition to the Badger Working Group principles, some other essential parameters for what this project would be and what it would not be. The work teams, as I described, operated for several months, came up with a series of recommendations, draft recommendations. Governance and stakeholder groups had opportunities for input during the spring. We convened a total of about 50 events, including forums like this, presentations to governance and stakeholder groups, web chats, et cetera, that attracted a total of about 7,000 members of our campus community. We also had an advisory committee headed by Dean Gary Sandifer that included representatives of governance and stakeholder groups. They provided input. Then the project team took that input, took the work team recommendations, and integrated them into the plan, which we posted on the website a week and a half ago. Continuing right now to get governance and stakeholder input as well as advisory committee input, and that will result in a plan that will include a series of different kinds of changes. There'll be some statutory changes in addition to the statute in the biennial budget that allows us and actually requires us to develop our own unique HR system. There'll be policy and process changes. There'll be technical changes. We're going to need to make sure that we're in alignment with the new payroll and benefits system, HRS. There'll be program and service changes, but in the middle you also see there will be cultural changes. The work teams, we asked the work teams to think big, to not just focus on the changes that had to be in effect by July 1st, 2013, but to take a look at the entire scope of how we attract, develop, engage, and retain talent. And there are a lot of aspects of the plan that didn't really require a change in statute, but will require a change in how we deal with each other, and we'll talk about them. So that's where we were, where we are now, and where we're going. Why do we need a new HR system? Well, the legislature is requiring us to develop an HR system, personnel system, uniquely designed for UW-Madison. This is something that our campus has wanted for several years. But the work teams really took a close look at why we need a new approach for HR. What are the issues? Well, one of them is the two separate personnel systems. Very complex to administer and also to understand, and also creates quite a few inequities between particularly classified and unclassified employees. And as I mentioned earlier, if we talk about benefits programs, we have a third system for our trades employees. Out-of-date job titles and inflexible pay structures. We have about 1,700 job titles on this campus. I don't know what the right number is, but I think it's something less than 1,700. The last time we did a job classification study here at UW-Madison was more than 20 years ago. So we need to take a look at our job classification system, the way our titles are organized, the extent to which those job titles allow our employees to advance. We also need to take a look at our compensation structure to build in the kind of flexibility that we need to make sure that we are competitive in all cases, in all occupations, in all job titles for the best talent. Perception of hierarchy. This came through loud and clear when the employee categories work team did its work, that there's a strong feeling, particularly among classified employees, that they are not on an equal footing with the other categories of employees, academic staff and faculty. And the work team actually described this as a caste system. So we need to do something to deal with that perception, those issues. Inconsistent employee performance management and development processes. These two work teams, performance management and employee development, as they looked across the campus, they realized that we are very inconsistent in these two areas. There are units that do a good job in making sure that everyone understands what their role is, what their goals and expectations are, that they get coaching, counseling, and feedback on a regular basis, and that they receive regular performance evaluations. There are other units that where employees told us they can't remember the last time they got a performance evaluation. So there needs to be more structure and consistency around how we deal with each other to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction. And also employee development. There are units that do a good job helping and enabling their employees to develop their competencies and prepare themselves to advance or move into other positions. And they put their money where their mouths are. There are other units that don't do a very good job, and we need to have more consistency around our commitment and our commitment of resources to help our employees develop. Limited data to inform decisions, whether it's compensation, not having enough comprehensive data about where we need to be compensation-wise to be competitive, or diversity, or who is applying for our jobs. We need more data and better data to inform our decisions. Ineffective and inefficient recruitment tools, because we are in the state classified service, a lot of concern that that system does not serve us well, does not allow us to do the kind of recruiting and applicant assessment that we need for our jobs, which in many cases are quite different from other state agencies. And the need to balance workforce flexibility, the need for managers and supervisors to have the flexibility to manage their workforces and get their work done, and the critically important need to preserve employee protections and job security for all members of our workforce. So those were the issues that the work teams identified and the issues that they addressed in their recommendations. And we'll talk more specifically about the recommendations in the plan. I want to talk a little bit about the factual basis that we've been operating on since the beginning of this project and continue to operate on. We recognize that there is going to be legitimate disagreement about what ought to be in the plan and how this new HR system ought to operate. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why we're having these web chats. That's why we're going to the governance groups, the Labor Management Advisory Committee, to have those conversations. But we also believe that we should all be operating off the same set of facts. And here are some of those facts. All UW employees will continue to be state employees. There was some confusion about that. Even though we'll have a new and specifically tailored personnel and HR system, we will all be state employees. The ability to create this new system stems from the biennial budget, which was passed last year, Act 32, not Act 10, which severely restricted collective bargaining rights. Some confusion about the basis for the statutory ability to create the new system. As I mentioned, this is something that UW-Madison has been hoping to get and asking for many years. Employee categories that currently have due process and just cause protections will continue to have those protections. And this is critically important because the law requires us to extend and maintain these protections for employees who are on our rolls as of June 30th, 2013, but it does not require us to extend these protections to employees who were hired on or after July 1st, 2013. However, because these are such important and fundamental principles, the plan calls for preserving just cause and due process protections for all employees in categories that have them now, regardless of when they are hired. So we are going above and beyond what the law requires us to do. Base wages will not decrease as a result of the HR plan. We made that commitment as one of our parameters. Cost of living and general wage increases will still be used as mechanisms that are available to compensate our employees. New system will pay staff at least a living wage. Right now, there are a number of employees who earn less than a living wage, UW-Madison employees. Because we're in the state compensation plan, we cannot pay those employees a living wage as computed by the City of Madison. We have to pay them below that living wage. As of July 1st, 2013, when we are able to have our own personnel system, we will raise those wages to at least the level of the City of Madison living wage. Pay adjustments will reflect a broad range of factors, including market, what we need to do to be competitive for talent, equity, provisions to make sure that we are paying our employees fairly across the campus. Performance, there will be a performance aspect, but it will be within defined guidelines. However, we are not going to prescribe performance criteria for compensation decisions. Those criteria should be developed by the administration in collaboration with governance groups and by the individual divisions and departments. And this has come up a couple of different ways. For example, around faculty compensation, concern that compensation decisions based on performance would value research over teaching. We make no conclusions in this plan about that. That is a decision that will be made, as I said, by the administration in collaboration with the governance groups and by individual units. This plan does not set any performance criteria. A few more facts. The right to collectively bargain will be maintained and not involuntarily taken away from current employees. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Governance rights will not be diminished. In fact, the plan calls for extension of governance rights to classified employees. Right now, classified employees have sort of informal governance rights, but we believe, and the plan calls for extension of formal governance rights to classified employees at least by July 1st, 2013. We hope that the governance structure will actually be in place before the new personnel system is in place. Hiring will be based on civil service principles, that is merit-based. Even though we'll no longer be in the state government civil service system, the law requires us to put in place a civil service-based, merit-based hiring system that will be based on competition, qualifications, determining who is best qualified. And that, again, is a very important principle that the law requires us to do, and we enthusiastically endorse. Project used available data. We also benchmarked against 19 major research institutions, the majority of which are public research universities. We did not benchmark against the private sector. Which leads me to the next one. We'll be adopting a new personnel system that meets our culture and our mission here as an institution of higher education. There were concerns that the plan would corporatize or privatize. I think if you go through the plan, I don't think that you'll see any attempt to corporatize or privatize. And I go back to the fact that we benchmarked against other major universities, not other sectors. The HR design work team members, there were 143 of them. On the 11 work teams, they represented all stakeholder groups from across the campus, governance, labor, other stakeholder groups. There were 46 of the 143 who were HR professionals. We felt it was important to make sure that the work teams had that kind of expertise, and I think the work teams appreciated the fact that there were people with HR expertise as they begun to appreciate just how complex the current system is. But we worked very hard, not only on the work teams, but on the advisory committee to draw from the entire campus community. Also some concern that because we'll be taking on new responsibilities, that we can no longer rely on the Office of State Employment Relations for around things like compensation, recruiting and hiring, and some other areas, that this is going to result in a large increase in the number of staff in the Office of Human Resources. And even though there are some that might want to see that, we don't anticipate that that will happen. There might be some temporary increases as we develop and roll out programs like additional training and development. We will need to add some expertise in compensation, but as you'll see later, one of the things that we will be doing in the Office of Human Resources is an organizational review to make sure that we're organized in the right way to support this new HR system. So just wanted to kind of quickly go through some of the facts. Again, I want to say that I recognize that there will be legitimate disagreements about what this plan involves and how we should move forward, but I hope that we all are operating off the same set of facts. So let's get into the individual components of the plan. I'm going to briefly go through some of the highlights. There is a lot more detail in the plan, as those of you who have looked at the plan recognize. 158 recommendations. One of the appendices to the plan lists each of the 158 recommendations and what happened to those recommendations, which were included in the plan as priority items, which have been deferred. I'll talk a little bit about some of the activities that will occur after July 1st, 2013, etc. We really felt it was important to honor the work of the individual work teams by listing their recommendations and what happened to them. Key aspects of employee categories. The plan calls for starting on July 1st, 2013, to include salaried positions, that are jobs that currently are in the classified service that are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, to move them into the academic staff category. That would include about 1,400 positions that are exempt, moving them into the academic staff where the rest of the exempt positions are. This work team found that there are many cases where individual employees who do basically the same work, in IT, for example, in some cases they're unclassified academic staff, in other cases they're classified. Doesn't make any sense. And the proposal here is to move those 1,400 positions eventually into the academic staff. We need to create a new employee category because as of July 1st, 2013, we'll no longer be covered by the classified state service. So the proposal is to rename what is currently classified staff university staff. And those would be the hourly positions, the classified non-exempt positions. So those positions currently in the classified category, except for the 1,400 exempt positions. Now, this would be done over time. Provide every one of those 1,400 employees with a choice as of July 1st, 2013. Do they want to move into the academic staff, or do they want to essentially stay where they are in the renamed university staff? We in the Office of Human Resources would provide each of those 1,400 employees a specific summary of what the implications would be if they move, because there are differences between the classified and unclassified staff in terms of benefits, for example, leave accruals, the benefit calendar. There are significant differences. Also, academic staff do not have the right to collectively bargain, and university staff will. So that should, I imagine, be an important component, thank you, Harry, of that decision. We will work individually, just like we do, to counsel people on retirement one-on-one to make sure that everyone understands the implications of that choice. We will not put a deadline on that choice. However, if an employee in the classified service decides to move into the academic staff, they can't move back, but they don't have to make that decision immediately. Now, as those positions become vacant, those that stay in the classified, renamed university staff, as those positions become vacant, we will move them into the academic staff. So eventually, all of those positions would move into academic staff, but it would take years for that to happen. We'd provide degree waivers for those exempt staff who move into the academic staff who don't have college degrees. Right now, there's a requirement in the academic staff for a college degree, but there is a waiver provision. So we would apply that waiver position, recognizing that there are exempt positions, salaried positions in the classified staff that really don't require a college degree. And we certainly don't want to impose that requirement if it's not necessary. And then as positions are moved from university staff to academic staff, we would consider whether a degree would be required on a case-by-case basis. Also provide governance for university staff. Provide formal governance similar to what academic staff have now. As I mentioned earlier, there's sort of informal governance with classified staff, but we believe it's important to make that formal, and we're recommending that that be done by Board of Regents policy. This is an area where we need to be in alignment with UW system. UW system, at the same time we're developing a UW-Madison new HR system, they are also developing a new HR system for the other campuses, but there has to be some alignment, and this is one of those areas, employee categories and governance. But we are recommending that the same language be used for university staff governance that is used for academic staff governance. So for all intents and purposes, it would be the same. And we would also hope that the new university staff governance structure would be in place by January 1st, 2013, so that we can work with that structure to develop some components of the new HR system that have to be in place by July 1st, 2013. So we think this is an important aspect of providing an additional opportunity for classified to become university staff to have a voice in particularly the personnel policies that will affect them. Compensation and job titles. In this area, we've developed kind of a short-term and a long-term set of recommendations. Long-term, develop a compensation structure that balances a number of different factors that are going to be important to differing degrees for different occupational groups and different job titles. So it balances market competitiveness and internal equity, so we are in the best possible position to attract talent from external sources and also retain talent, but there is equity across similar occupational groups in the university, and also accommodates cost of living adjustments as well as performance. Right now, we can reward performance for classified staff. We cannot do that for faculty and academic staff by law. So the plan calls for requesting statutory change. We'll do this in cooperation with UW System so that we can reward performance for all of our employee groups. We need to create a transitional structure for university staff compensation effective July 1st, 2013, because we'll no longer be in the classified staff, the state compensation plan. What we will do between now and the spring, and we're already working on it, is develop a transitional compensation structure for university staff to go into effect on July 1st, 2013. We will present that to the campus in the spring of 2013 and have a conversation about it moving towards implementation by July 1st. But we believe that there are some areas where we can provide additional flexibility. For example, right now, we cannot provide classified non-exempt employees with performance-based pay increases, only bonuses. We think we need more flexibility than that. Right now, if we want to hire somebody into a position who has 10 or 15 years of experience from the outside, we have to start that employee in the classified service at the lowest rung of the salary. We want to have the flexibility to bring experienced people in at higher levels than that. So those are some of the areas that we think we can build in some short-term flexibility. Continue the campus-wide policy to provide a living wage. As I mentioned, on July 1st, 2013, we'll be able to raise those hourly wages that are under that living wage threshold up to the living wage, at least the living wage. And longer term, develop a scope and proposal initially for a job title and total compensation analysis. We haven't had one for a long time on this campus. We really need to collect some data. We need to take a look at our 1,700 job titles. As I said, I don't know what the right number is, but I think it's something less than 1,700. Make sure they make sense, make sure they're transparent to our own employees as well as people who are interested in working in the university. Make sure we build in advancement opportunities and make sure we understand where we need to be in the various job markets that we operate in. Some jobs we compete in a local job market, others it's a regional market, some national, some international. And we need to get good, consistent, and current data on where we need to be. So that's kind of at a high level where the plan calls for us to move in terms of compensation. Short term, do some things to put them in place by July 1st, 2013, and a longer term compensation strategy that will provide a number of different mechanisms to reward and advance the compensation of our employees. Employee benefits. This was an area in which the benefits team recommended that we move towards a single integrated benefits program. The idea being we want to create more consistency between particularly the classified and unclassified personnel systems. And one area where there's a lot of inconsistency is benefits. But as we heard during the spring, this became a very complex issue. Things like leave accruals. To go to a single system would create a process where there'd be some winners and some losers. And we didn't want to do that. We heard the campus loud and clear that there were issues that we needed to deal with in a more thoughtful way. So what we're proposing is that a lot of these benefits issues, questions, be folded into the title and job compensation analysis, including vacation and sick leave accruals, which were big issues when we introduced the work team's benefits recommendations. So that would be done in a more thoughtful and a collaborative fashion with the entire campus to put together a proposal that would, we hope, integrate the benefits programs, the various benefits programs, but in a way that would work for everyone. Let me go to the second one. However, there are some things that we believe we can do in the short term. One is to provide first-day health care, employer-paid health insurance coverage for classified employees. Right now, classified employees have to wait 2 months to get employer-paid coverage. Unclassified employees don't have to wait. That is an area of clear inequity. Another area of inequity is that classified employees, newly hired classified employees, can't use their accrued leave until they've been with us for 6 months. Unclassified employees can. So our proposal is to allow classified employees, university staff employees, to be able to use their leave as they accrue it right from the start. Also, creating a single catastrophic leave program. Right now, if a classified employee wants to donate leave to an unclassified employee, or vice versa, they can't do that. And we really haven't been able to figure out why not. So we think it makes sense to create a single catastrophic leave program and eliminate that barrier. Also, create a benefits backpack to ensure that when our employees move from one campus to another, move to a state agency, move back, that they bring with them certain benefits, primarily their accrued leaves. We don't want that to create a barrier for our employees to move. There were some recommendations about streamlining some of our insurance programs. We have 5 life insurance programs, for example, right now. A lot of confusion for new employees about which is the best program. The work team recommended that we streamline those. We can't do that unilaterally. This has to be something that we do in cooperation with UW System. And there is, as you see, a fringe benefit advisory committee, which we will recommend this to for their consideration. And then provide opportunities for governance groups, including the newly established university staff governance groups, to have a voice in decisions about our compensation structure. And that would include collaborating on the job title and total compensation study, as well as continuing collaboration with those 3 governance groups around the structure of our compensation and benefits. So those are the areas that we're going to address right now in benefits, but folding in the more complicated areas to the job title and total compensation study. Job security. I mentioned earlier, this is an area that is a difficult balance. On the one hand, managers and supervisors need flexibility to manage their workforces, to manage their work. On the other hand, there are important job protections and job security provisions that need to be maintained. As we move to the new system, we'll no longer be in the classified service, but we need to maintain the same type of job security in terms of appointments for university staff as they have now. So we will create a new permanent appointment type for university staff, as well as a temporary appointment type to replace LTEs. We need to implement a new set of university staff layoff policies because we'll no longer be in the state system. We're recommending that we increase the layoff notice from 15 to 60 days. Right now, there's a minimum requirement of 50 days. We rarely give that short a notice, but we want to be systematic about that and make it a requirement that there be a minimum of 60 days notice. Allow factors in addition to seniority to be considered for layoffs. This is an area that would create some consistency between the classified and unclassified categories. Seniority would still be the number one consideration. It would be the default, but with the approval of OHR, units would be able to consider other factors, a limited number of factors, like particular expertise or the mission criticality of particular positions, but seniority would still be the number one criterion. Eliminate mandatory restoration rights, but expand our placement services so that we are helping our laid-off employees or employees who are facing layoffs find other positions, including requiring hiring managers with vacancies in similar occupations to interview employees who are facing layoff or who have been laid off. We define layoff group by operational area, not college, school, or division. This would be decided when someone was hired. Their appointment letter would identify the layoff group that they're in. Implement more consistent probation policy, not a minimum. The default would be a 6-month probation period across university staff. There would be a provision for extending probation with review and approval by OHR, but the standard would be 6 months. Eliminate the right to return after failed probation. Right now, classified employees who change jobs within the campus, if they fail probation, they have the right to return to the position that they left. What has happened is many of our divisions have adopted policies that they will not fill those vacancies for 6 months until they learn if the employee who has left has passed probation. This puts a lot of pressure on the unit as well as the other employees who have to do that work. So the plan calls for eliminating the right of return. Supervisors would still have the ability to hire employees back if they fail probation, but that would no longer be mandatory. And then we need to create a university staff appeals process because the current appeals process will no longer apply to us. We would hope to work with university staff governance. We hope that that structure will be in place by January 1st, 2013, and we would work cooperatively with the university staff governance to put in an appeals process, again, that would link to the due process and just cause protections that would be preserved. So that's what we're doing in job security, what the plan calls for. Recruitment and selection, employee movement, we have to create our own hiring system because we'll no longer be in the classified hiring system. That includes no longer have the ability to post jobs on WISC jobs, which is the OSER, Office of State Employment Relations, job site. So we're going to have to create our own. We think we can create a system that will be efficient, effective, timely, and user-friendly. We also recognize that we need to allow applicants who are not able or capable of applying online to have an alternate paper-based mechanism, and we will do that. Replace the current classified hiring system, which includes civil service exams, employment registers, lists of certified candidates, with a university-specific system. It will still be civil service-based. It will still be based on job qualifications. It will be defensible, et cetera, et cetera. But it will be more tailored to the university and more flexible to meet the needs of individual units to fill jobs that are unique to the University of Wisconsin. Create a couple of new mechanisms, again, that exist in the unclassified service, and particularly with direct hire, that we want to extend to all employment categories under very specific conditions that would be regulated by the Office of Human Resources. Hiring units would be allowed to hire directly without competition. Again, we would identify the criteria and the conditions. Similarly, internal recruitment, allow hiring units under specific conditions to limit competition to internal candidates, excuse me, and that would include student employees as well as temporary employees. We would make sure in OHR that these flexibilities are not being used at the expense of ensuring that we're attracting a diverse candidate pool or that we're engaging in practices that are unfair, and that would be our responsibility in the Office of Human Resources. Continue to develop a recruitment toolkit. We know it's going to be a new system. We understand that we need to educate the campus community, not just the people who are doing the hiring, but all of our employees, about what the new system involves, how it's going to work, and what these new hiring mechanisms are. And again, that would be OHR's responsibility to make sure that everyone, as of July 1st, 2013, when the new system goes into place, understands it. Fostering and managing talent. This is an area that covers the work of several work teams. A more effective performance management system for all of our staff. I mentioned earlier that was a big issue that the work team uncovered as it did its work. This is another balance because we believe that there needs to be more structure around how we work with our colleagues to make sure that everybody understands their role, their expectations, their goals, gets coaching, counseling, and feedback, and gets a performance evaluation. There needs to be more structure. On the other hand, this is a very decentralized organization, and we have to be careful that we're not overly prescriptive. So what we're proposing is that the entire campus adopt sort of a performance management calendar so that during each performance period, managers and supervisors, and this would include faculty who supervise some of our staff. At the beginning of the performance period, required to have a conversation with the employees who report to them to agree on roles, goals, and expectations. There would be a mid-year required check-in, and there would be an end-of-year formal performance evaluation. That would be the structure. We consider that to be a floor, not a ceiling. These conversations should be going on continually, not just at 3 times a year, but at a minimum, we want to create that kind of structure. We're not prescribing what kind of evaluation forms to use or what guidelines should be adopted in those conversations, at least not initially, but we feel like we need to get on the same page in terms of what the minimum requirements are. We know this is going to need some additional training, particularly with managers and supervisors. If we expect our managers and supervisors to do a good job in working with their employees on performance management, we have to make sure that they have the knowledge, the tools, and the competencies. And this is critically important, not just because everyone needs to understand what their expectations are and get feedback, but if we are going to make performance an aspect of compensation, and this came through on the compensation team as well, we need to have in place performance evaluation systems that are fair, objective, and transparent, and that will require training. And again, that will be a responsibility of the Office of Human Resources. Pilot the use of competencies. This was an idea that the competencies team recommended, that we identify across the campus a set of knowledge, skills, abilities, behaviors that we believe are important to helping us achieve our mission, and then identify what those things mean. There was pushback on that. People didn't understand, in some cases, what we meant by competencies, were concerned about how they might be developed and used. So reflecting that feedback, the plan calls for 2 pilots on developing competencies. First, for human resources professionals, not just in OHR, but across the campus. And one of the reasons we chose HR to be first is we want to not just tell the rest of the campus what it ought to do, but we want to do it ourselves first. So we'll pilot it, we'll evaluate it, we'll collect data, we'll have a conversation about the results, we'll decide whether or not to extend it to other occupational groups, including managers and supervisors, which we believe should be next on the list for piloting. So that's fostering and managing talent. Diversity, inclusion, and employee engagement. The diversity team found that there is a lot going on this campus around efforts to attract and retain a diverse community. But most of those efforts are oriented towards students, and not very many are oriented towards employees. And where there are efforts going on, they're disconnected and uncoordinated. So this team has recommended, and the plan adopts the recommendation, create campus-wide accountability for employee diversity and develop a workforce diversity plan. And we've already been in discussion with Damon Williams and his folks about how to do that. Similarly, develop a set of measures of diversity and equity. So we know where we are right now, we know where we need to be, and what kind of progress we're making towards truly achieving a diverse workforce at all levels and in all occupations across our campus. And then establish accountability for diversity and bias-free HR practices within OHR. And we're eager and willing to take on that responsibility. For example, we're going to be rolling out a new compensation system. We're going to be rolling out a new recruiting and hiring system. We need to, in OHR, be able to evaluate the extent that those systems are operating in a fair and bias-free fashion, and we will take that responsibility on in the Office of Human Resources. Conduct a campus-wide employee engagement and inclusion survey. The diversity team focused a lot on workplace climate and the fact that it's a shared responsibility, but recommends that we collect data across the campus on employee engagement, workplace climate, and inclusion. We just did in the divisions that report to the Vice Chancellor for Administration, 14 divisions, 4,500 employees. We administered to all of those employees an employee engagement and inclusion survey. We've shared the data with the division directors, and we're working with them to analyze the data and act on it. And this team recommends that we expand that campus-wide and do it on a regular basis. And the last thing, improve campus climate by building on current efforts to improve onboarding. Onboarding being the process that we use when a new employee comes on board to make sure that they have the knowledge and the support to be successful. It goes beyond orientation, which is usually, a day or two or a week. Onboarding is a process that begins when a new employee accepts a job offer and goes all the way to the end of their first year. And this team believes and recommends that that's where we ought to begin to have the conversation about a shared responsibility to create a positive workplace and a positive work environment. And also develop a workplace flexibility toolkit. There was a workplace flexibility team. It looked around the campus and realized that there are lots of different flexibilities that are available to employees, but a lot of employees don't know about them. A lot of managers and supervisors don't know about them. A lot of managers and supervisors believe that workplace flexibility is an employee perk and not something that can enable us all to be more effective and enable us to balance our work and personal lives. So the recommendation and the plan calls for us in OHR to develop this toolkit, which would include an educational component that would make sure that we all understand what these flexibilities are, why they're important, and how to apply them. And again, that's an area that OHR will take responsibility for. Speaking of OHR responsibilities, we will conduct an organizational assessment of how we are structured. Right now, for example, we have a unit that is responsible for classified personnel. We have another unit that is responsible for academic personnel. In many cases, those professionals deal with the same employees in the units. If we are going to move towards a system that more closely integrates the classified and unclassified personnel systems, we need to take a look within OHR about whether we're organized in the right way. We need to make sure we have the right support and expertise to put us in the best possible position to make this new HR system successful. We need to create an HR dashboard, measures of the extent to which the university is succeeding in attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining talent, and measures to evaluate the impact of the new HR system. We've actually built in a milestone in the strategic plan to evaluate the new system. And we need to communicate better from OHR. Right now, we have a whole bunch of different websites, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but really isn't a very good idea. So we need to have a website that communicates in a way that is clear, comprehensive, and user-friendly. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing within OHR. So those are at a very high level, the components of the plan. Go back to the critical issues that the work teams identified. We've also done a mapping that compares, and I'm not going to go through this, but the issues and how the plan responds to the issues. You see them listed separately. You can look at them in your handout. This is, as I mentioned, a strategic plan that will be put in place over a 2 to 3 year period. However, there are certain things that need to be in effect by July 1st, 2013, because as of that date, as of 12:01 a.m. on July 1st, 2013, we have to have our own systems in place to recruit and hire, to compensate, to advance, etc. So these are the things that we will be moving towards initially implementing by July 1st, 2013. This is the way the process is going to work, collecting the feedback from governance and stakeholder groups like we're doing right now. We'll refine the plan, make final adjustments. The executive sponsors, the chancellor, the provost, the vice chancellor for administration will review the revised plan, review the feedback that we've gotten, and make the final decision on what the plan for UW-Madison will look like. The Board of Regents will take action, we hope, at its December 7th meeting. Then in the spring, and we'll do that at the Board of Regents in cooperation with UW System, their plan and our plan. Then in the spring, we'll go to the Joint Committee on Employment Relations. We're not sure what level of detail Joker is going to want to see, but Joker also needs to approve both plans. So we, along with UW System, will go to Joker in the spring, moving towards implementation on July 1st, 2013. Of course, we'll continue to involve and collaborate with stakeholder groups, including governance, including labor, as we move towards the July 1st implementation, and also after, because this is a multi-year plan to put in place a comprehensive new HR structure. We're really asking that members of the campus community provide feedback through their various stakeholder groups. We don't have much time. We don't have as much time now as we did in the spring to collect feedback. We don't have the time to do 50 events. We're doing as many as we can in a compressed period of time. But we have worked with the stakeholder groups to set up email boxes, so we're asking that in addition to events like this, where we're getting feedback directly, that feedback be sent through the governance and stakeholder groups, and then we continue to work with them to get that feedback. And hrdesign.wisc.edu contains the plan itself, also includes the final reports of each of the 11 work teams, and those reports map back to the vision. As I mentioned earlier, the plan also includes a list of the 158 recommendations that were made by the work teams and what had happened to them. So there's really a lot of information in the plan itself. We are anxious to have this campus conversation. We believe that that the plan does set out a blueprint for us to move forward in this new era when we'll have our own HR system to make sure that we're in the best possible position to attract, develop, engage, and retain talent. So thank you very much for being here today, and we're going to do questions now, right, Harry? And I also have with me Steve Lund and Mark Walter. Steve is Director of Academic Personnel, Mark, Classified Personnel.
So as I said when we got started, we would love to receive your questions and comments. This can happen in a few different ways. If you've written down a question on a card that you'd like to come up here, we have a couple people, Jay and David, who are going down the aisle to receive those cards. If you'd like to pose a question from the floor, Lisa Jansen back there has a mic to be able to do it. Lisa, we have one down here. And then, in addition, if you have a comment or a question that you'd like to convey without it necessarily coming up here, we have a box on the table just outside the room that you can leave your questions and comments in. In addition, I want to strongly encourage you and also your colleagues to submit additional questions or comments to your governance and other representative stakeholder groups through the email addresses that have been identified. So, we have a question.
I just wanted to ask the question, in one of your earlier slides, you had a round circle with perception of hierarchy.
Right.
And I just wanted to ask, when and who and why in the process were the faculty not included in the HR design? Because I'm perceiving that there is a true hierarchy with the faculty not being included in the design process.
The faculty were included. The faculty were included on the work teams as well as on the advisory committee.
But none of this design is having to do with faculty.
Well, no, that's actually not true. There are compensation aspects that will affect faculty. There are aspects of performance management that will affect faculty as managers and supervisors. So it does affect faculty. The one thing that was not on the board was the structure, the job structure of faculty. But there are many aspects of this project that will affect faculty and academic staff, and I think it's important to understand that when we talk about managers and supervisors, that also includes faculty who serve in those positions. And we've had several conversations with the faculty about that, as you might imagine.
So this question relates to the trades. What category will the trades be put in? And will you be honoring the federal prevailing laws, bargaining in good faith, since we haven't had pay increases since 2009?
Mark's going to handle that.
The trades would go into the university staff job category, and they are one of the only certified bargaining units we have on campus today, and that structure would continue. And we would still be going with the prevailing wage as far as now. Bob?
Is it on?
It's on. It's on.
As I was saying, that the trades would be in the university staff job category, and the prevailing wage would continue. But as Bob indicated, we're going to be going through a compensation analysis down the road. That area will be looked at as well as we proceed.
Yeah, why don't you repeat what you said about certified?
The trades is one of the only bargaining units on campus that's certified, about 250 employees. We also have the Service Employee International Union that's certified under the current law. I believe that's about 35 employees. So we only have about close to 300 employees that are in certified bargaining units as of today.
Oh, okay.
We're not being paid prevailing wage now. You said that prevailing wage would continue. We're not being paid that now, and not since 2009.
Mark, can you restate with the comment and then?
The comment was that we're not being paid prevailing wage right now and have not had a pay increase since 2009. Well, with the trades, their pay is determined by various percentages that was bargained a number of years back through the state, and so we're not looking at disrupting that aspect at all. But we do want to look at the wage or the compensation analysis to see what is the practice with the trades as far as for the future. Bob mentioned doing that study starting next year, and so. We're not looking at changing anything until we get a better understanding of what occurs as far as with the wage analysis, the compensation analysis.
We have a question over here.
Two questions, actually. One is you mentioned that you collected a lot of data, and I wonder if you can share with us an example or two of the data and benchmarking that was used in the process, and also what kind of plan do you have to measure success once all of this implemented? And the second question, if you excuse me, I'm sure that all four of you are standing here are extremely competent and everything, but you also are an example of the lack of diversity in higher positions. Mm-hmm. So I just, and really I'm saying it in a good way, not to put any of you down. So I was wondering if you can share with us a little more about the plans for diversity in the higher echelons as well as the lower ones.
Let me answer the first question first, which is plans for evaluation. We mentioned an HR dashboard. We think that will be the fundamental way that we will be able to empirically measure the ability of the campus to attract, develop, and retain talent. We've made a commitment to that, to developing that dashboard and making it transparent and sharing it with the entire campus community. As far as diversity, I am who I am, and I was asked to lead this project. But keep in mind who we report to, the Vice Chancellor for Administration, Darryl Bazell, one of the three people who will be making final decisions on this. So I would ask you to consider that as well. We also took great pains, to the extent that we could, to make sure that the work teams represented the full range of campus stakeholders, not just by occupation, but also by demographic diversity. I also agree with you, and we are dealing with this issue, including within the Vice Chancellor for Administration, those divisions, that we need to focus on diversity at all levels and in all occupations of this campus, and that's going to be one of the areas that is one of the areas that the diversity team, work team, focused on in terms of a campus-wide accountability and plan for achieving diversity, not just among the student population, but also among employees. And there has not been a focus on that, and there needs to be.
There are several questions related to governance. You're saying that you're going to be providing governance for university staff. There are just questions about what that's going to mean. What is it now? What will it become? And how will it then relate to the whole process of providing advice and input on things like benefits?
Yeah, I think I would ask you guys to address the scope of governance.
Right now, the classified staff have the Council for Non-Rep Classified Staff, and we would see a similar group emerging for university staff governance, and that would be similar to what academic staff have right now. under academic staff policies and procedures, dealing with the same types of issues. But certainly that body has to be formed, and that body has to come together and start helping us work on the various policies and procedures for the university staff in the future.
There are a number of questions here that relate to rewarding performance, merit increases, things of that nature. So how will this, in real terms, people are wondering, how's this going to affect salaries?
Well, we can't answer that question right now. We were asked to develop a set of mechanisms that would provide a flexibility to incorporate a number of different factors into compensation, including cost of living across the board, performance, market, competitiveness. Now, when Darryl Bazell attends these sessions, this is where he gets up and says, we did not ask the HR design team to come up with a funding model for this process. That is a separate conversation. And I think, when you take a look at the Critical Compensation Fund, that is an opportunity that the campus provided to the units to make some financial rewards based on a series of criteria. We are not, as I mentioned earlier, in the plan, we do not identify what those criteria should be. As I mentioned, we will develop and bring to the campus a transitional compensation structure in the spring, but we don't know whether or not there are going to be state compensation plans. We don't know what the financial resources of the university are going to be, but we have put together a proposal that would provide a series of mechanisms that would vary across the campus, different occupational groups. Let's take performance. We got a lot of feedback on, I'm sure we've got some up there, on performance. As a result of the feedback, the compensation work team revised its recommendation to explicitly reflect the fact that there are some positions on this campus for which performance should be a bigger factor than others. There are some positions where it's very difficult to identify specific and big differences in performance among people who are in the same occupations. There are other positions where it's a lot easier. So the combination of those factors is certainly going to vary by occupational group, and that's the kind of flexibility that we were asked to build in, and I think this plan delivers that. But as far as how much am I going to get individually, there are a lot of factors, including where the resources are, and we don't have answers to those questions.
And then just to reiterate what I've been hearing from you, Bob, that there's no adjustment in base wages, base pay that's built into the way we're thinking right now, other than the comment that you made earlier that we now will have the flexibility to make sure that all people are paid at least a living wage.
Well, yeah, we'll certainly make that adjustment, right. We'll find the resources to do that.
We have a question back here.
Yeah, going back to the governance issue on university staff, you said it would be in a structure similar to the non-represented council, but some of us have no idea what that is.
Well, the Council for Non-Rep Classified Staff was formed, I believe it was about 12 years ago or so, in which it's a group, it's not an official governance body, but it was felt by the campus, by the campus community, that group, it was about 600 people that were supervisors and managers that were classified. They did not have a voice. We had labor as far as collective bargaining units with labor organizations providing a voice. We had academic staff that were able to provide a voice through their governance. Faculty that certainly have their governance to provide that voice, but that group of about 600 or so classified staff did not have that type of body. So that body was created to provide that. Even though right now they're not an official governance body, they're not statutory as far as governance, the campus helped create that. Certainly it was the folks that were in that group really created it. And that organization today is seen as a governance body, even though they're not recognized statutorily as a governance body. And so the creation of the university staff, we will be looking at how the CNCS was formed, we would look at how the academic staff governance was formed, and figure out how we move forward to create the university staff. As Bob had indicated, we're going to need to get that process going soon, because there's a lot of things that need to be done in various areas for the university staff by July 1st of 2013. And so that organization needs to be formed in the next 3-4 months as far as we proceed.
I'm not sure if I said this or not, but the plan calls for the language that will create the university staff governance structure to be identical to the language that created the academic staff governance structure. So there will be that kind of equity between those two structures.
Mm-hmm. So one of the questions that's been coming up here is we're going to have an opportunity for exempt staff to move from what's been classified, what will be university, over to academic staff. What are perceived to be the advantages or disadvantages of either moving to the academic staff or remaining in the university staff?
Well, the main differences right now, and I believe Bob talked about this, would be the leave areas. Right now, there's a different leave structure for academic staff than there is for classified staff. And at some point in people's careers, the leave schedules are better for academic staff, and then at some point in people's careers, the classified leave schedules are better. Generally, as classified employees get more seniority, they get more leave, and that would include certainly vacation and the sick leave. There's a more sick leave accrual for classified employees. For academic staff, there's an initial bank of sick leave, but then it's less amount being accrued. And so those are some of the things where there needs to be an assessment by the employee to determine, is it right for me to move between those groups? Obviously, as Bob talked about, the ability to collectively bargain. Academic staff under current law aren't able to collectively bargain. University staff will be able to collectively bargain if they get certified. Another area that's a difference is in the retirement area. Right now, when you're close to retirement, academic staff, they have their retirement figured on the last 3 years within a fiscal year, while classified employees, it's within a calendar year. So there's always the various things that people need to consider if they get that choice to move between classified and academic staff. And we certainly, the Office of Human Resources, are going to provide counseling to the employees to provide them with all the information they need to make an informed decision.
But also want to reemphasize that the concept behind this movement is to put like jobs with like jobs, eventually move the exempt positions that are currently in the classified staff with the other exempt positions which are currently in the academic staff. And that will take time, but the idea is to give people the choice and equip them with the information so that they can make a good choice.
What changes are being considered related to student hourlies? There are several student questions that have come up here. And are students exempt from the living wage standard? If so, why?
I'm smiling because I was just looking at an old pal of mine or two who I know who are likely to have asked this question. The proposal or the commitment to move to living wage for employees does not affect student hourly employees. We have talked with some folks from ASM, it's been a while, about the possibility of a student living wage. Excuse me. And that is something that we'd like to continue that conversation. But at this point, the answer is no to living wage for students. As far as how it affects student hourlies, it doesn't affect student hourlies directly very much because student hourlies don't have benefits and most of the things that this plan addresses. We will be looking at the local market for students, however. Many of our big employers already do that. Our big employers of students, such as the Wisconsin Union, Housing, and so on. But we'll be taking a more informed look at that globally, and that may affect student hourly raises.
Okay. You want to follow? Yeah, she'll bring you the mic.
So you said you were looking into creating a student living wage. Can Can you tell me what the difference between a living wage for a student and a living wage for another person would be?
Sure. Well, the living wage, and I personally don't think it's a living wage, but the living wage is based on a family of four. Most students do not have a family of four. Of course, there are exceptions. The other thing is that students, we don't take Social Security, for example, so that is therefore a higher take-home pay. Students, we consider in many ways student hourly pay to be some help in terms of student assistance. And actually, I didn't bring up the notion of a student living wage. A representative of ASM had mentioned it as a possibility.
Okay. So here's a question that's coming up in a couple different ways. People understand how faculty governance is valued, but there are a lot of faculty who are in place or required to be managers, supervisors, leadership roles, who get no supervisor training and are ineffective managers. There's actually another word here. The question is, will these faculty be held more accountable as supervisors in the new HR system?
We certainly hope so. Now, I was asked a question a couple of weeks ago, how are you going to require all managers and supervisors, including faculty, to go to training and learn something? And I said, well, I think we can handle the former, but I'm not sure that we can handle the latter. If we had some magic potion that we could use to make sure that on July 1st of 2013, every employee on this campus, including managers and supervisors, does exactly what they need to do, then believe me, we would be using it. But I mentioned in that picture that showed the various range of changes that are going to need to occur, that there's going to be cultural change. And that's one of the big areas. So that's one of the reasons that the plan calls for this to be a multi-year strategic plan. We know that there is going to have to be cultural change on this campus around those kinds of issues. We have told that to the executive sponsors. We have also told them that accountability begins at the very top of this organization, and if we're going to hold managers and supervisors accountable, we have to hold their managers and supervisors accountable. But it's going to take change management. We do have a change management team that is going to be working across the campus to help us implement this stuff. It's going to take accountability. It's going to take new programs, and it's going to take data for us to evaluate the extent to which, for example, managers and supervisors are attending training, and that's changing behaviors. But this is not going to be an overnight or easy change.
So just following this theme with accountability.
So you're asking your own questions now, Harry?
Huh? No, I'm not. I'm getting them from the group.
Okay.
So one of the themes that's coming up is about holding employees as well as managers accountable in the performance management system. And just any more information about how we're planning to be doing that.
Well, we're going to have to put in place data collection systems. So, for example, we know the extent to which performance evaluations are being done, the extent to which people are attending training, and even the extent to which training is changing behavior. So a lot of it is data, but there has to be shared accountability, and there has to be cultural change. And I don't have any easy answers for that. That's why this is not something that's going to occur overnight. This has to occur over time.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, you have another question?
Is it on? I'd like to present a different perspective on that. I think the university would be better served if you folks would realize the faculty are never going to become interested or capable at HR. They are here for a totally different purpose than most of us employees. That's also why someone mentioned the hierarchy. The hierarchy will never disappear because this is a university. People are here for education and research. And what I think, instead of expecting all faculty, let me back up. I work as a grants manager, and the faculty that do research that have multi-million-dollar federal grants are already overwhelmed with huge amounts of, they have to do effort reporting, they have to do progress reports, huge amounts of bureaucratic stuff. So they already need administrative people like me to help them. And I think if you are going to improve managerial practices by faculty, what they need is more support. Each department will need someone to make sure that those performance reviews happen. The fact, I just think if you expect the faculty to undergo a cultural change, you'll be disappointed.
Thank you.
And
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. But I also think that we all need to understand that our ability to be successful in those areas depends on the people that we work with. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. But I don't disagree with any of your points about providing additional support or coming up with additional ways to get these things done. But I hope that at the end of the day, we are able to put in place a structure that will allow us to do that. But there's no single answer. I'm with you on that.
So there's a question down here, Lisa, when you get a chance. And there's one back there too? Okay, wonderful.
About the minimum living wage and how that was calculated, but what is the minimum living wage?
12 something?
Do you know?
It's in the plan. What is it, 12 something?
I believe right now it's $11.62 an hour, and for January I believe it's $12.19 an hour for employees, or I should say the living wage. And incidentally, we use the same living wage that the city of Madison uses. So when that goes up, we base what we identify as a living wage based on the city of Madison's calculation, a family of four based on the federal poverty rate.
So before we go to another one from the floor, there's a question that's shown up in a couple of different ways about what if this all stalls? What if Joker stalls its decision, refuses to approve the plan, and then what if it goes through, but there are calendaring kinds of adjustments? So they're related to the approval process and the timing of that.
Yeah, that actually came up yesterday at the Faculty Senate. The law requires us to have in place on July 1st, 2013, a new system. We'll be out of the classified service. So the legislature has already told us that we need to put this system in place. Now, I can't predict what the legislature is going to do. 2 or 3 years ago, who would have predicted what the legislature decided to do? But we are beginning to work with legislators, including those who are on that committee, to make sure that they understand where we are, and we're doing this in conjunction with UW System, understand where we are, what we're thinking, and whether or not there are any obstacles or issues that the legislators see. Now, one complication is we don't know what the legislature or the committee is going to look like after the November election. So we might be talking to people now who aren't going to be around. But nevertheless, we're starting to have those conversations. But we are already under the requirement to put in place this system and to be moved out of the classified service. So again, I can't predict what the legislature is going to do, but they've already told us that we have to come up with a new system. And one of the things we said earlier is we're not sure what level of detail Joker wants to see this. So that's something we'll have to figure out between now and then as well, in cooperation with UW System.
Another calendar kind of issue that's come up is around people who are close to retirement and how their retirement packages are affected by the implementation of the new system.
Yeah, not at all. And that's one of the reasons that employees will be given the opportunity to choose whether or not they want to move from classified to be renamed university to academic staff, so that they understand what possible implications that might have for their retirement. But there aren't any other proposed changes in the plan that would affect that. And I didn't say this, but I should. When I said we'll still be state employees, we're still covered. We'll continue to be covered by the Wisconsin retirement system, the state health insurance system, deferred compensation, and several other benefits programs. We'll still be in the same situation as other state employees as it pertains to those systems.
Lisa?
Hi, all. The question I had is from a perspective of being involved in local government, and I know recently the county, the city, and the Madison School Board have all negotiated extensions of the contracts to their unions, and I'm wondering if obviously the train sort of left the station already for a lot of the unions here at the university on that, but I'm wondering if there's any willingness to have some sort of bargaining or some sort of working with unions that have not recertified because of the stringent legislation from the state, if there's an ability even right now to negotiate with them, given the current court ruling, and what is HR's perspective on working with these unions that have not recertified.
Well, as it stands now, that court ruling does not affect the UW or state employees. And so legally we're not able to collectively bargain except for those organizations that have been certified, as I mentioned earlier, the trades and SEIU. So by law, we cannot be collectively bargaining with those other groups. With that being said, we certainly meet with those labor organizations and have discussions about various things, and they still are our partners as far as on the campus, but we're not able to collectively bargain with them under current law, and that the decision that was made in the court that does not affect state or UW employees at this time. Now, certainly, if legislation does change, then we certainly do what needs to happen as far as collectively bargain. And if labor organizations decide to become certified, more of our labor organizations decide to be certified, we will be negotiating with them for wages and whatever we can under the law. But at this point, we're not able to do that.
And he had a question there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes,
I'm going to give you the last
171.
question.
Pardon?
I'm giving you the last question.
Okay, I'm with 171. We have a lot of concerns about this HR design. It's not going to be good for most of our members on most of the points. One of the points is clearly merit pay. Merit does not work for most of our folks. Most of our folks are custodians or other kinds of workers, and it's pretty basic. You've made your hamburger. It's like anybody else's hamburger, and you've cleaned the floor, and it's as clean as it's going to get. And what assurance do we have that merit pay is not going to not be another form of favoritism? So under the current system, you have raises that are on a guaranteed level. It's fair for everybody. That's what we need. We need a system that's fair for everybody. We don't need some arbitrary merit system that will allow for favoritism because the boss likes you.
Right. Okay.
Or the boss doesn't like you.
Right. Or doesn't. Right.
I couldn't agree with you more that we don't want a system that that bases pay on favoritism. Also, to your point about certain positions not being amenable to merit pay, I think the revised work team recommendation in the plan reflects that there are certain positions where performance is going to probably be a very small, if at all, factor. And that's going to be part of how we design this new system as well as performance evaluation. So I think we can agree on the goal. We may disagree on how we get there, but certainly we in OHR feel a strong responsibility to make sure that whatever system, what the specific details of the system look like, that we build in controls to make sure that performance evaluations and compensation decisions are made in a fair, objective, and transparent way.
So as we close here, one of the comments that was made too is making sure that we're hearing from everybody, not just those who show up, not those who raise their hands, but from everybody. And I want to really just put that back to all of us to encourage our colleagues. If people don't take the time to read through and understand what the implications are, then they will not be able to give us the best advice we need. Please encourage them to do that. Please encourage them to participate in these kinds of conversations. Please encourage them to send in their comments to our website. But very importantly, this is the real timeliness of what was stated earlier. Right now, in this compressed period of time of review by governance groups, it's very important that all of us communicate with our governance groups, that we let them know what we like in this plan, what we are confused by, what we don't like, what we have concerns about, Let's make sure that those who are representing us to do their review and who are really taking a lot of time to do that they do that with full input from us. If you have a final comment or question that you'd like to make sure we take in, then please put that in the box as you leave this afternoon. Thank you again very much for coming this afternoon. We appreciate your participation.